have to have, you have your photograph taken when you go in, you fingerprint. It's very, very restrictive, and it's very, very restrictive for the people that are living there. But it was described in 2015 by the then Chief Inspector of Prisons as a place of national concern. In 2018, there was a hunger strike. 120 women went on hunger strike to protest about their detention and also conditions at Yarlswood. It was the subject of an undercover investigation which exposed abuse by some staff, and it's run by Serco. Serco were also involved, have also been involved in the disastrous test, track and trace system that has failed over the last year. But there are allegations of abuse of female detainees by Serco staff. So it is a place that has been beset by scandal. There was a suicide there years ago, a very, very sad circumstance where a man killed himself the night before he and his son, his child, were due to be deported. And it's really a place that should be closed down. It should never have been opened in the first place. I'm a Labour Party member, but it was shamefully opened by a Labour government in 2001. And it was, we have the largest, one of the largest detention estates in the whole of Europe. And I think we remain the only place in Europe that detains without time limit. There was a woman in Yarlswood, a lady called Mabel, and she spent 3 Christmases in Yarlswood. And people have not, these are people who have not committed a crime other than fleeing war, persecution and torture. There may be people in there who have once committed a crime, but they will have served their sentences. So it really is a place that should be closed down, should never have been opened in the first place. So that was the situation. And what we found out locally just before Christmas, but the Home Office had a plan to effectively open what felt like a camp, a kind of prison camp within a prison. And they were planning to use the wasteland where buildings had been burnt down by the fire in 2002. And on that wasteland, they were going to put up porter cabins for up to 200 male asylum seekers. So I somehow managed to inveigle my way through a friend of mine who works for the council onto a so-called stakeholder group, and was absolutely horrified, as were many other people, to find out about the Home Office's plans. So I made it very clear from the first meeting when the plans were revealed that I would do everything I could to stop the plan going ahead. So within a few days, and this is the beauty of the kind of new normal of digital organising, we organised a public meeting. We had speakers from national organisations, local organisations. We have a very active group in Bedford called Legacy of Windrush Descendants. Stand Up to Racism were involved both nationally and locally. Care for Calais, Medical Justice. Medical Justice is a charity, if you haven't heard of it, that campaigns for better health treatment, healthcare facilities for people who are stuck in immigration removal centres, detained in immigration removal centres. So we had a broad range of speakers. Our local MP, Mohammed Yassin, who'd already asked some questions in the House of Commons, he spoke. And everybody was united in saying, well, we've got to stop this from happening, and how do we do it? Very fortunately, there was a lawyer on the call from Duncan Lewis. Duncan Lewis are leading immigration lawyers, and they have stopped many, many deportations. And they've been involved in action in other removal centres. So we followed that up, and so we put in a letter, what's called a letter before action. And our challenge it was a legal challenge to the Home Secretary, to Priti Patel, and also to Bedford Borough Council as the planning authority, that the plan to go ahead without going through a planning permission process was unlawful and irrational. That was the main basis. And the Home Office had circumvented planning permission by saying that it was an emergency. And we said, well, there is no emergency because there are literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of empty hotel rooms where we know other people seeking asylum have been placed, and they're far from ideal. I've been supporting people in some of those hotels, and I can tell you they are far from ideal, but they weren't going to be, effectively in little cold porter cabin cell-like units on wasteland in the middle of nowhere, with a notorious immigration removal centre bearing down on the camp. So we challenged it on the grounds that there was no emergency, that there had been no full environmental impact assessment done, and also that there had been no public consultation under the public sector equality duty with regard to protected characteristics and community relations. So we sent the letter in early January. We launched a crowdfunding appeal because if we had gone, and we didn't have to go through a full judicial review, but if we had gone for a judicial review and we'd lost, we would have had to have paid the costs. So in order for ordinary people like me or you or organisations to challenge the decisions of public bodies, judicial review is obviously the option. I think there's been an increase, or it seems to me there's been an increase in legal challenges recently. But there are legal precedents that costs can be contained at 5,000 for an individual and 10,000 for an organisation. So we set up a crowdfunding appeal. We'd raised our initial target of £5,000 within 24 hours of launching the appeal. We got some good coverage in national media, in the Guardian, in the Independent, the Morning Star, and locally. We also obviously lobbied the Borough Council to ask them to enforce a planning application from the Home Office. They didn't do that, but they did discuss it, and all but the Conservatives, it won't surprise you to hear, Labour, the Lib Dems, Green, and there's an independent councillor on Bedford Borough Council. They all spoke out in opposition of the proposals and went public in the media on that. We obviously got parliamentary questions asked. I worked with Mohammed Yassin and the MP for Nottingham East, Nadia Whitome, and they were going to put in an early day motion. So, it was a big campaign. We got 70 local faith leaders across Bedfordshire to send a letter really condemning the proposals, the plan for the camp. And so there was growing outrage. Local media was covering it on a regular basis. And then to our sort of delight, in early February, we found out that the Home Office had changed its mind, and they weren't going to proceed with the proposal. I mean, what they said, and it was, we think it was obviously a face-saving explanation, was that Yarlswood was only ever intended as an overflow. That was their word, overflow or overspill accommodation. And they didn't need it because there'd been fewer people coming over from Calais than had been previously anticipated. I mean, obviously, we were delighted that that wasn't happening because we thought it was a particularly cruel and inhumane proposal to place people actually on wasteland on the site of an immigration removal centre. You're probably aware of the former army barracks at Penally in Wales and Napier in Folkestone, and there's also one in Norfolk that have been used. I mean, I'm pleased to say, and you probably already know this, that Penally is being closed. There was a legal challenge on that. We're hoping that the same will happen for Napier as well, because that has been particularly beset by controversy. There was a fire a month or so ago. There have been suicide attempts, several people on suicide watch. the reports coming out of Napier, well, and Penally are, the conditions are absolutely appalling. And I think for a while, at the beginning of this year, some of the people staying there, some of the people seeking asylum, actually slept outside in the freezing cold weather rather than sleep inside in the barracks. So we won a small victory here in Bedford. We got onto it. We didn't waste any time. We had to act really quickly. Originally, the Home Office were going to move people in just to add to the cruelty on Christmas Eve, and then it was delayed till early January. I mean, it's hard to convey, quite how on another planet the people that I met virtually from the Home Office. I mean, there would be a team of 8 to 10 people on the calls, and they would talk about it as though they were creating some kind of holiday resort. They just seemed to, talk a different language and almost breathe different air to people that actually thinking detaining people who are through circumstances not of their making, and risking their lives to reach the UK, that this was an appropriate place for anybody to live. So we're obviously pleased with that. We would like Yarlswood to be closed down. We would like every single immigration removal centre closed down. I am part of Labour Campaign for Free Movement, and at the 2019 Labour Party conference, we got a resolution passed overwhelmingly calling for the closure of all immigration removal centres. It was Labour Party policy in the 2019 manifesto to close Yarlswood and Brook House, but we argued that there was no logic not to close all of them. And that resolution also had other measures like ending no recourse to public funds, allowing people seeking asylum to work, abolishing the health surcharge, and just really taking a humane, welcoming, decent approach to people seeking sanctuary and refuge in our country. So, the battle continues, and I'm now linked up to a campaign in County Durham called No to Hazardfield. If you Google it, there's actually a rally this evening at 6 o'clock organised by Durham People's Assembly Against Austerity, but essentially the Home Office is proposing to open another immigration removal centre on the site of a former youth offending institution, a secure training unit for young people, which was very notorious. And they're proposing to open a unit there for women, an immigration removal centre. So, we are having these victories, undoubtedly. Penally is closing. Yarlswood didn't proceed. And I think where there is local activism, where there's legal action, where there's political outcry, where the media campaign is significant, we are able to achieve these victories. But we won't really kind of win the war against the hostile environment until every single immigration removal centre is closed down, and actually we've got rid of this wretched, awful, cruel, callous Tory government, and we get a Labour government installed, but a Labour government that has a good approach to welcoming asylum seekers and refugees, and that's what we've got to fight for. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you about this campaign, and thank you for inviting me. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rosie. That was very interesting. I was just about to say, does anybody want to ask Rosie any questions? You'll need to unmute yourselves.
Right. I've got one. You said we need to campaign to allow refugees to work, or asylum seekers to work. That used to be the case. I can remember, because I'm in HR at a time, once somebody had been here for 6 months, they were able to work. Who got rid of that, and what was the thinking behind it? Do you have any ideas?
Well, once again, I have a feeling it was the Labour government that abolished the right of people seeking asylum to work. I don't know what the thinking was behind it. I don't remember the detail of it, but I think I'm right in saying it was a Labour government. I mean, Labour has not, Labour is not without criticism on immigration policy. We know that, and that's gone back over decades. Obviously, the Tories and, you know, with the connivance of the Lib Dems for the first 5 years of the coalition government, they really hardened the hostile environment. So, you know, none of the major political parties are, you know, without criticism. But I think this particular government now, and you've probably, I'm sure, all read in the press this week about these, you know, what feel like far-fetched, outlandish proposals to place people, you know, seeking asylum in other countries or on islands. Ascension Island, I think, was being suggested months ago. You know, it just feels barbaric, and you know, I'm sure we all question every day, what kind of country are we becoming? What kind of country have we become? But I think nothing speaks to that more than some of the proposals that are coming out at the moment for how people seeking asylum could be treated. I think it's horrifying.
Yeah.
I think about the only thing that keeps me sane at the moment, Rosie, is knowing that I still have a passport that means I can leave.
Yeah.
Numbers of us are very jealous of Liz's Irish passport.
I know. I think we've all been tracing our Irish ancestry, haven't we?
Well, I was
just
born
wondering
there.
if it's too late to put myself up for adoption.
Well, very annoyingly, when I adopted my son back in 2009, I actually only became his special guardian rather than actual adoption, although you have to go through all the same processes. And had I actually adopted him, he'd have been entitled to an Irish passport, but there you go. Oh. Has anybody else got any questions for Rosie? Carol?
I'd just like to ask what we can do to help. I mean, you know, this has been really moved me this afternoon, hearing about this. I had no idea it was, you know, on our doorstep. And what can we do?
Well, I think get involved. I mean, the refugee and asylum seeker charity community is quite a crowded market. There's a lot of organisations out there, but there are coalitions and detention action. There is a coalition against detention. So I think, you know, getting involved, you know, whether it's just through liking stuff on social media, donating, getting active, you know, just connecting with those campaigns. I mean, Care for Calais, if anybody's interested, I am with other people, and I'll put my email in the chat. Well, actually, Jackie and Liz have got it. So if you contact Jackie and Liz, they can give it to you. But we are supporting a number of people, nearly 200 people, who are staying in hotels in Luton. And during we've been taking down clothes, or we were until the most recent lockdown. But some people are still going on a regular basis. But we had quite a few of us going down every week to give out warm clothing, footwear, toys, because there are families. There was a newborn baby in one of the hotels. You know, sort of baby items, nappies, sanitary towels for women. And what we're planning to do is Ramadan is starting sometime in the middle of April. I won't give the date because I think it depends on the moon. That's my understanding. But it's round about the 13th, 14th, 15th of April, possibly. We are planning to working with local mosques and the Islamic Muslim community in Luton. We're hoping to provide food so that when people break their fast, the iftar, we can provide some good, hot, culturally appropriate food, because there has been a real issue about the quality of food in some of the hotels, and there have been hunger strikes in the hotels. So whilst we were campaigning and saying there is an alternative, you don't have to stick people in porta cabins in the middle of nowhere. You know, there's hotel accommodation. Actually, a lot of the hotel accommodation isn't great. So it's just a way. So if anybody's interested in helping out, we obviously need to do this with lots of people volunteering. If you just drop me an email and with your phone number, I can add you to a WhatsApp group.
So Irene, sorry, Katja was first. I think she wanted to say something. And then you, Irene, then Farrett.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to say, as far as I know, it's the 12th of April when Ramadan starts. That's all. So you're basically, yeah, very close.
Barrett can probably clarify that.
Doesn't it depend on the moon?
Sorry, we're looking at the 12, maybe 13, because again, like it's the sighting of the new moon. So between 12, 13 and 14, that's the date we got to look out for. And what I would like to add is St Albans, we would like to get involved with Ramadan project if possible. I will be email, and I'm sure, you know, we have our Islamic centers here and we can get some volunteers to come in and help.
That would be great. I'm going to put my email in the chat now. So just drop me an email, but send me your phone number and then I can add you to the WhatsApp chat. That would be lovely, because we will need quite a lot of people, because we're ambitious. We're hoping, we had a meeting on, there it is, Rosie Aisha. We had a meeting on Tuesday this week, and we are actually hoping to serve food every night. So that's 30 nights. So that means we've started a fundraising campaign, or we are starting a fundraising campaign, but we'll also need people to help distribute the food. So please do get involved. It's just up the road for you, isn't it, Luton?
Yeah. Thanks, Rosie. Irene, you wanted to talk.
I don't know if you're aware, there is actually a hotel in Hertfordshire as well that's open.
So can I just introduce you, Irene, so that people know how you know this. Irene is one of the trustees of Hertfordshire Welcomes Refugees, one of the three groups that are based out of St Albans, and three refugee groups, two of which operate abroad and one of which operates here primarily. I mean, we all match and swap occasionally, but primarily that's the best description of us. Sorry, well, Irene, go ahead now that we've introduced you.
We were set up really to look at the resettled refugees across Hertfordshire. That was our first remit, but we have got involved in the asylum hotels. Firstly, the one in Bourne End in Dacorum, which was closed. And now we're working with Hearts for Refugees, who are taking a lead in distributing goods to the hotel in Boreham Wood. And I don't know if you know, there is also dispersed accommodation for asylum seekers here. And that concerns me as well, because we don't know their situation, and it's even more difficult to get to know where they are, but we haven't got direct contact yet. There are regular meetings, and I believe there's also one in Luton that there are regular multi-agency meetings around the hotels. We think the hotels were going to close at the end of March. We've been told that it's now spring. So I don't know, end of April, the end of May. But you know, we've been providing, there's also some underspend from the east of England, which we've drawn down. And I know that, I'm sure Bedfordshire, the hotel, I'm sure your local group in Luton will have drawn down some, because there was money from the East of England Strategic Migration Partnership. I don't know how much was in Luton, so we've drawn a bit of that money, some for the hotel and some for the dispersed asylum seekers. But I mean, we haven't really discussed Ramadan food. We know that the hotel are going to change their food schedule. We've been pushing for that because we have fortnightly meetings, Zoom meetings with the managers of the hotel and other agencies. Basically, their statutory agency. We and Hearts for Refugees are the only voluntary groups working. And I don't think we need more groups working, but it's other, you know, sort of, because there are only 30 people in the hotel, whereas in Luton, I think there are 2 hotels and I think nearly 200 people.
I think there's 175 altogether.
Yeah, which is a
I did know about the Hertfordshire hotels, because I think there's there's a WhatsApp group that links Luton and Hertfordshire or Hemel Hempstead.
That's right,
So
exactly.
I hadn't kept that much of an eye on that particular WhatsApp group because it sounded...
Because we're only talking about 35 people. And we've got education involved as well to make sure the children get school places or nursery places. We're taking down bikes. Hearts for Refugees are the ones that are going, I think, almost fortnightly to the hotel. The managers are seeing what they need, what the residents have been asking for, and we're trying to meet their needs. It's not easy, but I am also concerned about the dispersed accommodation because that's Broxbourne, Hatfield. There's one family in St Albans that I'm trying to make contact with, but we've got no links in Broxbourne at all. That worries me. And when things ease, we're really going to try and get to work with, again, it's Clear Springs who have the contract for the housing and the hotels. And I think it's Clear Springs. I'm not sure about Bedfordshire. It might be Clear Springs.
It is Clear Springs, the Bedfordshire hotels. It's Clear Springs.
Yes.
And it's a bit hit and miss, I think, with whoever happens to be in charge in a particular hotel.
I think that's absolutely right, because the one in Bourne End, the managers welcomed us with open arms, and we set up ESOL. There was all sorts of things, and there were, it was People Not Borders worked with us for that one. So it's the groups that normally work out in Calais because you've got the goods. We as a charity don't have goods, But I think it is a real problem. And also they closed that accommodation overnight. They were given, they were told that day in Bourne End that they were moving, and people were moved all over the country with no support. So, part of what we did was link with, when we found out where they'd gone to, link with a local group and put them in touch with the charity there, because it is hit and miss. We couldn't find information about the Elstree Hotel for an awful long time. And it's only by pushing the East of England Strategic Migration Partnership, who had the overview, that we got these meetings set up. But I do know there's a similar group similar group in Luton. But of course, you're talking about massive numbers.
Thank you, Irene. Marion, you wanted to say something, and then I think we'll move on to our next speaker then.
Yeah, it's just a comment from what Irene's just said about this dispersal all over the country with no notice. Do you think our government's taking advice from the French? Because that's what they seem to have been doing in Calais and Dunkirk for absolutely ages, dragging people away from the communities that they know and putting them anywhere without proper support in place. To me, it's just...
That's the same
beautiful.
For any dispersed asylum seeker.
And that, given that Marion mentioned Calais, is a very good excuse for us to move on to our next speaker, which is Tia from Care for Calais.
Hello, thank you. So yeah, my name's Tia, and I've been a volunteer with Care for Calais for about a year and a half now. So I'm in Calais at the moment, and I was going to talk a bit first of all about Care for Calais, and then tell you a bit about the situation in Calais and Dunkirk. So I realise from what you've said so far that some of you know quite a lot about it already. Obviously, like recently it's changed quite a bit because of COVID and because of a lot of things, and we've had a lot less volunteers, so I think the situation's changed quite a lot. But yeah, so Calais, Care for Calais has been around since 2015. It was created in response to the refugee crisis in Calais and the amount of people who were trying to get across the border when the jungle was here in 2006, like 2015, 2016. So we've been working here ever since. Obviously, like, the big jungle's gone and was replaced by smaller jungles with less people, and that's still the situation now. Obviously, people convene in Calais because of a desire to get to the UK. So this is for a number of reasons, mainly often because people speak English or because they've got family and friends in the UK, so want to cross to the UK. And there aren't any safe and legal routes for them to do that from Calais, so they're forced to risk their lives either through trying to get into the back of lorries or getting onto small boats and crossing. Obviously, the small boat thing has been going on for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and that's gained a lot more media attention because it's a lot more visible. So obviously now a lot of what we hear in mainstream media is about the amount of people crossing in small boats and the amount of people generally crossing from like Calais and Dunkirk and Belgium, northern France to the UK. Now, I don't think the numbers have necessarily gone up. It's just the fact that the boats are more visible, that obviously the media play on this, and so does the government, in order to make people think that there are a lot more people crossing than there actually are. Obviously, like, the two ways of crossing are extremely dangerous, and in the year and a half I've been here, a lot of people have lost their lives that way. Probably about 10 people are known to have died. That's just since I've been here in the last year and a half. So that's quite often trying to cross on boats, but also sometimes trying to cross on lorries. And a lot of these stories never even make the news. Like just over a week ago now, there was a boat of 4 people that capsized. 3 of them were rescued, and the 4th person was never found and has now been presumed dead, but that's barely made the news at all. And obviously that's really hard on people here, and on the friends of the person who's disappeared, who just feel like their voices aren't heard. And I think people feel very much like they're not recognised, and that what they're going through just isn't really seen, and that no one cares. And I think it's really hard to see that and to see people feel that way. So I think days like the Anti-Racism Day today are really important, I think, to show people that we care and that we want to make sure that people's voices are heard, whether that's in France, whether that's in the UK, or on an international scale. So the situation in Calais and Dunkirk at the moment, there are about 500, maybe 600 people in Calais. It's quite difficult to tell because there are police evictions constantly. So every 48 hours, the police come to each of like the camps in Calais. They're not actually camps, they're unauthorized settlements because the French won't recognize refugee camps here. So they come every 48 hours, get people to move their tents, because otherwise, I think it's to do with squatters' rights. If people are there for over 48 hours, they then, the authorities then need like a court ruling to evict them, whereas if they've been there less than 48 hours, they don't. So yeah, every 48 hours, the police come around, they get people to move their tents. If people aren't there, then they take the tents away and take their belongings. But if they're there, generally they let them keep them. There are some bigger evictions where people are taken off on buses. Sometimes they're taken to hotels and accommodation where they're allowed to stay for a few days. Sometimes they're just taken somewhere and left on the side of the road. It really depends. And that can be anywhere between like quite locally and like right down to the Spanish border. Obviously that depends a bit with COVID, when during lockdowns and stuff, they're not allowed to take people as far. The situation is quite similar in Dunkirk. Again, there are quite like the clearances that happen about every 48 hours, and then the bigger evictions as well. There are about 250 people in Dunkirk. The main difference is that Dunkirk is mainly a Kurdish community, and we see quite a lot of families there, including women and children, whereas Calais, the majority of people are from Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Sudan as well, and some West African countries too. So yeah, people do tend to regroup by community. But in Dunkirk, yeah, the situation is really difficult as well. And there was an eviction there yesterday where people had no idea that there was going to be one, and the refugees, they were taken off in buses. I'm not exactly sure where to, but I think seeing reports from like the human rights observers who work here, about 75 tents were destroyed yesterday. Obviously, like, that's a massive amount. If you think there are like 2 or 3 people per tent, that's a lot of people who then don't have any, and doing distributions all the time is just, it's just not sustainable for organizations here, because just having to do distributions like every few days, every week, of tents and sleeping bags is just like, it's just not sustainable for anyone to have to do them that often. In Calais in particular, people have been moved around a lot. Last summer, we saw the biggest evictions since 2016 when the big jungle was destroyed. And basically ever since then, they haven't let people settle in one area. So there are smaller camps all over, which makes it a lot harder to get people the help that they need and to do distributions and to just generally give people aid and support, because they're a lot more spread out. It's more difficult for them to access the services, and it's more difficult for us to find people. We're always having to like search out like where people are and where people are sleeping and setting up their tents, and that's just really difficult. Like, it's a lot of resources to try and follow people all the time as the police constantly evict them, to try and be able like do our distributions and provide our services where they're most useful and where the most people can access them. All these evictions and clearances quite a big issue. People get their belongings taken a lot. And there are also issues like with police violence here that's really bad. There have been a few incidents recently, like there's one settlement in particular that's mainly Eritreans, and there have been particularly bad incidences of police violence there. Like I know a few people have been hurt quite badly, like being shot quite close up with like rubber bullets or being tear gassed. We see a lot of tear gassing here. It's really bad. And just generally people getting their belongings taken a lot by the police. So at Care for Calais, we work, we do a distribution every day, so mainly across sites in Calais. I think we go to Calais about 4 days a week. We go to Dunkirk 2 days a week, and we go to Brussels 1 day a week usually. We also do some distributions in the mornings in Calais as well, so we do more than that. It's so mostly in the mornings we prep stuff in the warehouse, and then we take it out in the afternoon. So we do every day we do a distribution. It will either be like food packs or an item of clothing or tents or sleeping bags or something like that. And we also provide services like hair cutting, hot drinks, and phone charging as well are the main ones. We also do like sewing and bike repairs sometimes, and generally games that people like. Cricket's quite popular, and football, so we do those as well. Obviously this has changed quite a lot with COVID. We've had to implement quite a lot of social distancing measures. We've been a lot shorter on volunteers, and with Brexit as well, the beginning of this year has been really difficult. We've only just started getting donations over again from the UK. And it's been really hard, so we're just getting stocks back again, but it's been really hard the last few months. And with the constant police evictions, people losing tents and sleeping bags, that's made things a lot more difficult, and just not having the stocks of items here has been really hard. Also, we get a lot of our tents and sleeping bags from festivals, and obviously they haven't happened in over a year now, so that's been really rough as well. We've had to buy a lot of items to be able to distribute them. We've had a winter appeal that I know you've helped to support, and we're very grateful for that. That's been amazing because we have been able to buy items like tents and sleeping bags, and the last few months have been really difficult. I think it was for a week in February where the temperature didn't go above 0 in the warehouse. We had just had frozen pipes for like a week or 10 days. And obviously people living outside in that, it was really hard. And it's just a case of giving out as many hot drinks and coats and jumpers and sleeping bags and tents as we can. So it's times like that where like the winter appeal really help us get those items out. Yeah, it's just hard seeing like tents covered in snow day upon day, and it just doesn't melt because the temperature's so low, and that's really hard on people. So it's been really important for us to be able to get those items out. And finally, I just wanted, I know Rosie talked a lot about what happens in the UK, but and mentioned Care for Calais as well, but since last summer we have expanded and are working in the UK now, mainly hotels where there are asylum seekers, but also now that people are being moved into dispersal accommodation. So you're very welcome to get in contact with us as well to get involved at local hotels. I know we do work at the ones in around Bedfordshire and that area, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire. So yeah, I think we're trying to work hard in the UK as well to to raise awareness of the situation of what people have been through in Calais, and then the situations that they end up in once they arrive in the UK as well. I think, yeah, it's really important that people see that and see what's going on, and that like the statement of requirements for accommodation isn't being met in the UK either, and it's not easy for people once they arrive, and it's not because they're staying in hotels that they're being treated to luxury accommodation at all. A lot of them aren't necessarily getting the access they need to medical care or to legal aid, so it's really important that we offer support to people in the UK as well. But yeah, thank you very much for having me here today to talk about that. And if people have got questions on the situation in Calais and Dunkirk, if there's things I haven't covered, then feel free to ask.
Thank you, Tia. Has anybody got any questions? I know what I'd like to ask very briefly, because obviously St Albans for Refugees up until the last year was obviously bringing an awful lot of stuff across to both Care for Calais and the L'Auberge warehouse. And obviously we've not been able to go between Calais and now Brexit. Is this causing a real issue for you guys over there?
It's been really difficult since December. There was quite a long time where we weren't able to get items over, but it does mean that our drop-off points in the UK for donations have filled up, and now that we are starting to get items over again, we've just done a shout out for as many drivers as possible, basically to get to fill up their vans from drop-off points in the UK and to drive them over to Calais for us. And
what's the situation about export stuff now that after Brexit?
I think we thought it was more difficult than it was. I think it's more difficult for like new items if we're purchasing stuff in the UK, but for donations it seems to be drivers coming over to France so far haven't been questioned too much on what they're bringing. We've got like quite a lot of paperwork, but so far people haven't been particularly questioned and have been able to bring items over without too much difficulty.
No, that's good to know.
Good news.
Who else would like to ask Tia a question? Irene, go ahead.
Two things. It seems to me, are you working in a concerted way with all the charities that are sending stuff to Calais and Dunkirk? Because, you know, if there's problems with paperwork, you must all be having the same problems with paperwork. That was one question. Also, I mean, what really worries me is this government's policy, you're absolutely right, is very, very negative to do with asylum seekers, but it's also extremely negative to do with the resettlement programme. The only legal way that people can actually come here is through the resettlement programme. Now, I can tell you, in Hertfordshire, St Albans are saying, no, we can't find accommodation for people, so they're not signing up. Out of all the councils in Hertfordshire, we're really expecting very few. I think it's North Hart, Stevenage, maybe Dacorum, maybe Welling Hatfield. But so there's no legal way. You know, the legal routes are also being closed down, which is extremely difficult. So, I mean, that was a point rather than a question. You know, is there more we could be doing to get people here legally?
So for the first point, we have been talking to other organisations in Calais. It's quite difficult. I know that different people do it different ways. Like obviously places like RCK, Refugee Community Kitchen, mainly need to get food over, and I think they've had to set up in a different way to do that. If you're bringing items over that aren't for resale, basically that are donations, it is easier because if they're of I guess like low value in that they're not being resold, it's easier to get them across the border. But I think for all the charities it's been quite difficult. A lot of reaching out like more to European donors at the moment until I think it gets a bit clearer, but it's been quite difficult for everyone here, I think. And for the resettlement issue, I mean, there aren't really any legal routes. There aren't any legal routes to get over from Calais to the UK, so it's really hard. And obviously, there was like the Dubs agreement where a certain amount of children could be resettled, but they capped that at like quite a low number. I think it was about 480, and then just stopped. And also with Brexit, some of the other agreements just aren't really happening anymore. So yeah,
there was a big campaign around family reunion at the minute that Amnesty and other refugee action, detention, a lot of organisations are doing, but nothing to really push the resettlement. And the only way we'd be able to push the resettlement programme in St Albans if people came up with accommodation. You know, if we were able to go to the council and say to them, we've got a philanthropic landlord, he will, you know, they will, she will, you know, have accommodation there. You could probably push it this way, but I can't think of any other way at the minute.
Jackie, you've got your hand up.
I was going to make 2 points. Firstly, in terms of resettlement, if you look at what Ricky Patel was saying this week about settling refugees in Gibraltar or the Isle of
Sorry,
Man.
Jackie, can you speak up?
Yeah,
you
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Just about, yeah.
It's not good.
Oh, okay. Is that better? I put the call volume right up.
That's better, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I think it's because I'm on a mobile, it's just the volume. Yeah, if you look at what Priti Patel said this week about settling refugees in Gibraltar and the Isle of Man, you can see that, you know, what their kind of policy is, and it continues the hostile environment that Rosie was talking about. Is it St Albans that is the city of sanctuary, has been awarded City of Sanctuary? I think I read something.
It's not yet. I have got permission from the leader of the council to start looking into it.
Okay.
But it's been a bit of an odd year on the council because of COVID and everything else. So, but I have got permission from the leader of the council to look into it and go down that route. And I have had conversations with somebody who's involved with setting up cities for city of sanctuaries.
And actually, I think say because I'm part of that group.
That's one way in which we can raise the profile of refugee resettlement, and also just to emphasise what Tia said, that and Liz mentioned, ordinarily we'd go across to Calais and also Dunkirk 3 or 4 times a year, and we have got a winter appeal that's still on at the moment until the end of the month, for people to donate money rather than goods, because it's easier to get money across at the moment. So that is up on our Facebook page. If people would like to make a donation after the event, I'll repost it so it's there for people to see.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah. Does anybody else want to speak to Tia? Yes, Ida.
Hi, Tia. How many volunteers are you in Calais and Care for Calais?
There are about, I think at the moment there are about 13 to 15 volunteers, and there are 3 coordinators here at the moment.
And you do all that, just the 15 of you?
Yeah, the numbers have gone down a bit recently, especially as like we're coming up to the end of March, and obviously there are people who've been here since, like, we've got quite a lot of long-term volunteers, people who've been here since December who are on gap years or just who don't have work at the moment, but because of Brexit and the 90-day limit, they've got to leave at the end of March, which is why we've lost some people, and will do. Yeah, it's not easy, although volunteers who've crossed recently from the UK have been able to, because some new forms have been released for leaving the UK, and volunteering is actually cited as an exemption on them, a reason for which you can leave. So it has actually made things a bit easier, but the problem is like getting the tests and stuff is quite expensive, so that does put people off.
Liz Lincoln.
Tia, I wanted to ask, am I right in thinking, or did I read something recently to say that there was an area where the police were kind of leaving the refugees alone a little bit, so they were actually setting up more of a community, like the community was coming back to it, or did I misread that?
It depends. We did think that was what was happening in Dunkirk, but we got proved wrong because yesterday they evicted the area that they seem to be leaving people in. So Yeah, and in Calais, like sometimes they leave people somewhere for a while, and then suddenly there'll be a court order, and they'll just evict it properly. So they're not setting up any like proper camps or anything. They are trying to keep people out as much as possible. Yeah, it's just ridiculous that like it's not deterring people from going to the UK by uprooting them constantly. I think it makes people risk a lot more to be able to leave, because it's just awful to stay here.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's a little bit of hope there.
Liz?
Heidi, well, this is the last question for Tia, and then we'll move on to our next speaker.
I couldn't see how to put the hand up, so you've got a real hand.
That's all right. I'm watching you all like a hawk.
A question for you all, Tia, really. Man, I've been to Calais a couple of times, but I volunteer for refugees at home as well. I was just wondering if StAR or Care for Calais link with refugees at home, where I know it doesn't work for everybody, but where maybe you've got an asylum seeker who's homeless, and you can link them with a host. It's not a permanent solution, but it is a solution. I mean, I've hosted a couple of times myself. I don't know if do you link with them at all?
So for StAR's behalf, we mostly are working with refugees that haven't actually got to the UK yet. So Irene is the person who you talked to about making a link if they were still here. I will let Tia answer on her behalf regarding that question.
So I know a lot of the refugees we work with, the asylum seekers in the UK, are under NAS support and in home office accommodation, because obviously we've only started working more recently. There are people who've crossed the border more recently, and I think refugees at home I know it can accommodate people under NAS support in certain circumstances, but I think it's more designed. I have done some referrals for it. We have done some, I know like there've been a couple of circumstances where people might have been moved like to dispersal accommodation where they're a long way from family, or not able to pursue treatment or education or something. And I know we've done some referrals in that situation, and also for people who've been able to leave Napier. I know that can be like considered a particular vulnerability, and therefore that they might be prioritised in getting that kind of accommodation if they need, again, particular support in a certain area. So I know we have done, we have referred some people onto that service. I think it's really good. Like, yeah, it's been amazing from what I've seen. But generally, I think it's more difficult because a lot of the people we support are in hotels under like NAS support, and therefore don't necessarily qualify.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Tia. That was a very interesting update on what's going on in Calais at the moment. Just before we move to our next speaker, would people mind turning their cameras on just so we can get a photo? This will also point out who's actually, just got the camera pretending to be at the meeting.
I'm here, but I can't put my camera on.
Oh, Shelley, you're one of the speakers, my dear. Why can't you put your camera on?
Can you give me 10 minutes?
Okay, we'll do a camera after the next speaker. We'll do it after the next speaker.
Thank you. Give me 10 minutes. Thank you.
I'll slip down. The other Marion Hammersley field on there isn't me doubling myself up. My daughter's downstairs using my login. That's all.
Okay, is Effie here? Effie? Have you heard from Effie, Jackie?
Yeah, I heard from her this morning. We had a discussion about whether Greek time was 2 hours or 4 hours ahead of UK time. So she was due to log on at 5 o'clock Greek time, which is 3 o'clock our time.
I can hardly hear you, Jackie, sorry.
Let me just text her again. We texted this morning, and it was the time difference. I thought Greece was 4 hours ahead. She said they're only 2 hours ahead. So let me text her now, because she was due to be logging in.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, Shelley, do you want to go now? Because rather than leaving everybody just waiting for Tia.
Well,
or Effie even.
That's fine. I'm driving. That's all. I'm driving, so it's really not the best environment for me to speak in. But I just think
in that case, shall we take a few minutes break and people can get themselves a drink? And as it is quite a long session, if we take
Literally 3:10. I'll be there.
Okay, so we take a break for about 7 minutes, and then we'll come back to it, and Shelley will speak if Effie hasn't got here yet.
Brilliant.
I know.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're just on a little break while we were just took a break between speakers. We're starting again in about 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Effie is here now.
Fabulous.
So if we get Effie to start her natter.
Good afternoon. Do you know what? You shouldn't do it here because of the light.
Shelley, can you go on mute for the moment?
Oh, am I on mute? Okay, hang on.
No, can you go on mute? Effie, we can hear you talking while Effie's about to speak. Right, go on, Effie.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation this Saturday afternoon. I'm Effie Latsoudi. I'm working in refugee field since many years, but actually I was involved also as an activist back in 2005 in the solidarity movement, and especially because I moved to Lesvos from Athens, and I realized after a few years that there were people arriving in big numbers in Lesbos Island, not like it was in 2015, but still there were people arriving almost every day, and they were detained in horrible conditions in an ex-military prison and later in a warehouse. We knew nothing about them. Only the police were dealing with their situation, and also there were deaths, and that was the thing that shocked me. That the cemetery of the town was full of people who died during their crossing to Europe, and nobody knew about it. Like, these deaths were not important, like it was a casualty. So that's how I was involved, and I'm sharing this with you because I think it's very important to understand that the Lesbos situation is not something new. It's something that started. Lesbos actually was always a crossing point, a crossing place for to Europe. Since ancient times, it was always a bridge somehow, and sometimes also was the crossing to the opposite side, like there were Greek people that they were fleeing Nazis to Turkey. They were trying to save their lives there, and when they were caught and they were pushed back to Greece, they were killed by Nazis. So it's quite complicated, the story of Lesbos and the refugee situation. So actually I was involved, like working in the field in 2012 when we had also the refugee crisis. The Syrian refugees, they started to come to Greece, not through Evros, that was the case before, but through the islands again, because on Evros we have a huge operation against refugees with Frontex, police and army to stop them crossing. It was the Greek financial crisis, the austerity measures. The society is really in a crisis, and we started solidarity movement with the people of Lesvos to support also Greek people. But at the same time, we see that people are arriving, they stay in the police station. Nobody knows what happens to them. They are detained in horrible conditions. There was no Moria back then. And they are also not, we didn't know if they have food, what is happening with them. So we started asking for better conditions, participation. We collaborated with the church to bring some food, especially in order to see the conditions in the police station. You can understand that the context is that nobody approaches the refugees. It's only the police and the coast. We didn't have the right. There was no organization involved. Nobody had, even Red Cross had access to this condition. So we had to go like, okay, trying to understand. And this is for years. It was not something new in Greece. The policies were like very much against the refugees. So we started asking for a place that we knew that is abandoned. There was a summer camp for children, abandoned for years during the crisis and even before, near Mytilene, near the airport. And we were asking for this place that we knew that there were facilities like houses, very basic, wooden houses, a building, toilets, to take the refugees there and support them. So the authorities first, they said no. It was very clear that there was no possibility in Greece to have this kind of facilities for refugees without the presence of police and Coast Guard, and no fences and imprisonment. But in one point, because there was a lot of mobilization, it was also winter, end of October 2012, beginning of November, it was very cold. People were arriving and they were staying in the streets because the police station was full. In one point, the authorities decided to give us the key and enter the summer camp and start working. It was basically citizens of Lesvos participating, a lot of volunteers, different organizations, but it was something like happening, food, clothes, there was no budget behind it. The organization was we were self-organized, and very basic things. But it was very important that change shifted the attitude of the locals. Because at this point, because of the Greek financial crisis, everyone was like, okay, why these people are coming? What happens with them? They are illegal and blah, blah. And at the same time, when we started hosting them in a human condition, asking the citizens to come and support with food, and there was so much, it was like a miracle. People were coming with their kettles, and it was really touching and very, very impressive. So in one point, they started to talk about feeling proud to be there, feeling proud for supporting. And I'm saying this because now we are back to a situation before this. It's very hostile, the environment, the level of racism and xenophobia is very high. So that's how we started, 2015, and we kept the place open unofficially with the police. Everyone knew that this exists. And many times we responded to crises like 600 people sleeping outside in the port. They were coming to Pikpa. We were organizing the food, the clothes, asylum seekers that they were homeless. It was a place open for many people. And gradually in 2015, we have almost 200 people that they were referred to Pikpa, the vulnerable ones, like pregnant women, handicapped people, sick people, people with mental health issues, many victims of shipwrecks, that they lost their relatives in the sea. And that was the most traumatic part of our work for all of us. And in 2016, we started to have to create the Lesbos Solidarity to deal with Pikpa and other activities, because in 2016, as you know, the scenery changes. And because it's the days now, 18th of March, was the day that the EU-Turkey deal was introduced, it was announced. So at this point in Lesvos, we have already, there is a shift of the policies because there are arrests of people that they are supporting refugees in the beaches. They are trying to control the rescue teams. Maybe I need to tell you a little bit what happened in 2015. In 2015, it's a miracle of solidarity with many problems because the situation was not ideal on the island. The conditions for the refugees were really bad. But at the same time, there is a hope that they are moving. They are moving to Europe and they are leaving the island quite fast. So at this point, we have also a lot of visibility about the deaths. We have, of course, there is a moment that the deaths are doubled in 1 year in Lesvos, but there is also almost 800,000 people crossed. I'm not saying that it's normal to have deaths. I'm just saying that it was a moment, a historical moment, to make. For me, any death is unacceptable of refugees, and there is no reason that people lose their life. I'm just saying that there is a huge number arriving, and we have this the darkest part is the deaths. So in 2015, Pikpa is a kind of a center of supporting with food, with medicine, working with other groups, supporting the people that we already host. Every day, people are changing. And we go like this till the announcement of the EU-Turkey deal. With the announcement of the EU-Turkey deal, first of all, the authorities decide to make their dream is to go back to a closed camp. Moria is decided to become a closed camp, closed doors, back to detention. They are also announcing the closure of Pikpa, the eviction of Pikpa, because they don't need alternative, and in Karatepe, they don't need alternative human decent camps. There is a lot of Turkey is announced as a safe third country, while we have refugees arriving from Turkey to Greece. And the whole concept is that the people and the island becomes a prison for the refugees because they cannot move. There is confinement in the island. And there starts more problems. What happened, the first reaction at this point is that, first of all, we are all shocked with this because this EU-Turkey deal is giving institutionalized pushbacks, detention, criminalization of solidarity, everything is there. They try, it's a big experiment. And at the same time, allows, makes a statement that Turkey is safe, which is also politically very wrong, especially for Syrians, because Syrians had the temporary status of temporary humanitarian status in Turkey, which they didn't have much rights, but they were kind of having a protection, kind of very limited. So at this point, we have the first reaction of the locals that they start going out against refugees. There is a xenophobic and racist content in this, but of course also we are tired, we want our island back and all this. And we start as Lesbos Solidarity, we have the idea that, okay, these people are staying, we need to do something. So we start to go also for a support and education, psychosocial support and education, and vocational training. We had, in end of 2015, we created the Safe Passage workshop where we make bags out of life jackets that we have mountains of life jackets in Lesbos, and we created jobs for refugees. In 2016, we moved this to a building in the center of town. The idea is that we provide psychosocial support, legal support, and education, but also a nice place, and a place that doesn't have this, because this idea that the refugees have to live in conditions that we cannot live, or have activities in places that we cannot enter. I mean, for us, we found a place in the middle of town, so to have interaction with the locals, and for the locals as well, to have classes, activities, cultural events, and at the same time to be nice for all of us, to be a normal life, to remind us not traumatic and horrible places as the camps, but a real place that we could go and have a coffee, have a lesson, have an activity. That was Mosaic. That started the idea was May 2016, and we started operating in July 2016. So, if you want, I don't know if this is interesting for you, or I have to focus on something else. I will go to the conditions and the situation of today, of the last year, basically, because last year was a very difficult moment in March, and I think we have to talk about this because also gives you the possibility to understand what was, how the policies implemented and the decision by the state affect the lives of the people, but also the local society, what is happening. So, last, the EU-Turkey deal didn't manage to send back so many people that as the authorities hoped that they will be deported. But created, first of all, the first huge impact was in the life of the people, refugees, because their mental health was affected, even the mental health of children, by this confinement and trapped situation on the island. At the same time, we have the rise of xenophobia and racism and the extreme right voices that are prevailing on the island. And there are attacks against refugees. There is a pogrom in 2018. There is a lot of stigmatization and attacks against NGO, civil society, and solidarity movement. All of us, we were like the same. We were corrupt, we were smugglers, we are against the Greeks and the state. All this goes to last March, and it's very important to talk about this because we have the pandemic. It's a new element, and the element of fear. At the moment that we have the pandemic on the island, before the lockdown start, there is a lot of hatred narrative against refugees. Like, first of all, there is the decision of the government to make a huge camp in the middle of nowhere on the mountains to put the refugees there. There are reactions of locals from both sides, from all sides actually. There are people who are fighting against this camp because they don't want any camp on the island, and there are people who are fighting this camp because they don't want the refugees. So it's the camp is postponed. They didn't make it at this point because there was fights on the mountain. But a few days later, Erdogan decides to makes an announcement that they will send all the refugees to Greece, and it's the pandemic as well. Everybody is afraid. The narrative of the state is like they are enemies. They are coming as invaders, which was a huge. It is very important to understand how this. It was an enemy of the state and of Greeks. It was a huge impact on the mind of people that they don't know, and they don't have this. So we are confronting the refugees, we are closing the borders, we are pushing them back. In Lesvos, we leave them when the lockdown starts, the ones that are arriving, they were not coming in big numbers in Lesvos during this crisis, but the ones that are arriving, they stay in the beach. We don't approach them because it's also COVID. The ones that they try to bring them in the Moria Palace, the locals blocked the streets and they didn't want them to arrive in Moria. And in the beach, we have one boat arriving and the locals shouting at them, "Go back, why did you come?" And they were shouting to pregnant women and children. And there is huge violence those days. It was beginning of March against volunteers, against refugees, blocking the streets, beating them, attacking them with stones. It was a mess, and nobody, because the authorities were with the crowd, nobody really addressed this, and it went also unpunished, as it was the pogrom of 2018. So we go to the today's situation. They decided to make a new camp when Moria was banned. It was banned as a graveyard of human rights in September 2020. It was banned during the pandemic, while there was no plan about the people when the COVID cases arrived in Lesvos. And you know, these people were in a lockdown all through the Greek lockdown. We went out of the lockdown. Tourists were arriving in Greece, but the camp was in lockdown. It was a huge discrimination against these people, and the fear. They were abandoned there, thousands of people, almost 20,000, and they were in lockdown. So when they had the first cases, there was no plan what we do with these people. We just keep them there. And they had the municipality of Mytilene had attacked the MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, isolation area, and they closed it down. So we didn't have a proper isolation area. They were discussing what we do with these people. And in one point, they tried to keep them also inside their tents. Let's say that it's possible to do a lockdown in your tent. While all Greece was shouting, stay home, these people were staying in tents without toilets, without water. So there was this reaction. We don't know what exactly happened, but actually the Moria was banned. It was dramatic, but it was also relieving. But they created another camp after a few days that these people were in the streets, and there was a lot of pressure for the locals that the roads were closed, these people were everywhere, and there was again the threat, the COVID and everything. They took them in an old shooting place for military place, in even horrible conditions again, tents, rap holes, no infrastructure, no electricity, no water. Till today, they create some infrastructure. Imagine that in Moria, it was never created even after 5 years. So there are water trucks, there are a lot of mud. When it rains, the tents are going down. The heating is going down. Again, we have tents that are burned because of electricity problems. Children, almost 2,000 children, they don't have access to regular school. And of course, at the same time, with the hatred speech and all this, when we try to take kids to school, some schools, okay, they are reacting okay, and they are accepting kids, especially the kids that are staying outside the Moria group, the karate camp. But the ones that, for example, we had a dramatic case a month ago that finally they managed to take to high school 9 refugee minors that they were in apartments, and the whole village, but it was not the whole village, it was specific people that they were spreading the rumors that these are not minors, that they are against us, that they are Muslims and Muslims, and they are against our principles, they are rapers, whatever. It was 15 years old kids, and the public prosecutor was responsible. They blocked the school, they closed the school, and they sent the kids back. Now the kids, no intervention of the public prosecutor was responsible, not mentioning the traumatization of the kids and the traumatization of the teachers, because the ones that they went out public and said, no, we want the kids, they were attacked by these people. And of course, they made the class, but separated it from the other kids. They bring the kids when the school is closed, the regular school is open, which is huge discrimination and feeds racism. Together with the decision to create this horrible new temporary camp, they announced the closure of Pikpa, which was, in September, when we had so much need of supporting the vulnerable. And after 1.5 months of fight for Pikpa and the Karate, the other district camp that they close now, And in 1.5 months that we were fighting for Pikpa and for us asking them to let us operate because it's needed, and when it's not needed, they can take it back. They evicted Pikpa with huge presence of the police. This was like more media show because they wanted to show that they control, we were illegal and we are against, whatever, and that this, what they do is order and law, which is completely, opposite to any idea of law. Just the one sentence, we went through this shock together with the residents. We fight it together. Pikpa is evicted. And now what we try to do is to continue to support the people in apartments, because we had already started minors support in Pikpa and the mothers with children and newborn children, so they don't go to the camps. So we try now for decent accommodation outside the Moria camp, and we rented places so we can put already places for the ones that they had jobs. Lesvos Solidarity offered some jobs in these workshops and that we have.
Effie, sorry, Effie, I'm very aware of time, and I want to give people a chance to ask you questions. So,
yes,
if anybody's got any questions for Effie.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just conscious of time. Marion, do you want to ask a question?
Unmute myself. Thinking about sort of the age range, it sounds as if you've got from very young babies and children up to old people. Is that right?
Yes, that's how we always we try to support all the people, because all the people are vulnerable, but we are focusing to the most vulnerable because of the need.
Yes, because we sent to the Greek islands, I'm not sure whether it was your camp or somewhere else, they asked us for children's toys. And I think all of the people that were sorting, I know Liz Lincoln will probably agree, it's just so difficult for us here to understand the difficulties that you have when you've got sort of particularly younger children, kindergarten age, and what hell the children must be going through. It's so difficult for us to understand it, and you're living it and have been for 5 or 6 years. Kudos to you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And it's thank you very much, but you must understand that it's also that these children are re-traumatized under the conditions. This is very important to understand. They got through all this and the trip, and they are re-traumatized because the conditions they are living in is totally inappropriate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anybody else want to ask Effie anything? Farrett.
How many people are there in the camp?
Now, in the new 7,000 people.
7,000.
Now, 7,000 people, yes. Almost 2,500 children, approximately.
I've got to say, actually, nothing to do with Effie. I'm really jealous of Helen's mug. It's a great mug, Helen. Thank you for coming, Tia. I realise you've got to go. So, okay, well, if nobody else has got anything for Effie, shall we move on now to our final speaker, who is Shelley?
Hello. So I'm Shelley Hayles. I'm a social worker, educator, and I was a speaker at last year's Black Lives Matter protests in St Albans. Blown away by the work that these ladies on here are doing. I'm just, as a mother, I can only imagine what situations these women, how desperate these people must be to want to take their children on a boat and risk their lives to flee to safety. And the work you're doing is just absolutely incredible. I think what gets me is the fact that, these people are being denied access to countries, and our governments are the ones who are responsible for the situations that they're in, because we've gone over them, we've bombed them, and they're in that situation because of us. I think the whole of the Black Lives Matters protest. I'm not affiliated to the Black Lives Matters organisation. I literally just spoke there because Black Lives Matter. You know, I'm not saying they're more important than anybody else. I'm not saying they just matter. So I'm just still in shock after the last speaking. It's all of this stuff is so systemic. It's our governments have got a massive role to play in things changing for everybody. You know, we can do things on an individual basis, but we really do need to come together to make changes in everything. The 5 main problems that affect Black communities, not just Black communities, but the minority communities, are, you know, like Americans sort of call it mass incarceration, but, you know, the criminal justice system, the education system, gentrification, access to wealth, access to health. Those systems, we are disproportionately at a disadvantage in every single one of those institutions. So it is a systemic thing that we have to tackle. When Effie was talking, you know, despite the efforts of everybody there, you know, the media has a massive role to play in the narratives that they are portraying to people. And so when they're creating this climate of fear, you know, we all listen to the media with the pandemic as well. It's normal. That's why they use the media to get these ideas out and to create this climate of fear. So we are scared of the Black boy walking down the street. We are scared of these immigrants who are coming to take our houses. We are scared of these people, Muslims who are wearing hijabs, who are going to bomb us. But actually, you know, these people are no more of a threat to society or to us as individuals than the white person walking down the street. And when you look at the statistics, you know, it doesn't make sense, but this is what people do. It's what Hitler did when he was trying to drum up support for his for the Holocaust. You know, before he'd done the physical act of going out and gassing people, he generated this image of these Jewish people so he could get people on side. And this gaslighting and this narrative that's being fed out there is so damaging. So it's going to take us all to come together to challenge this and to realise that the messages that are being put out there are not true. Gosh, so sorry, I'll go back to what I was going to say now. Oh dear. So Black Lives Matters protest, I'm thinking about the protest, I'm thinking about what we need to do to get people to listen. And if it wasn't for the protest and people standing up, then the whole thing about the anti-racism wouldn't have come to the forefront now. I wouldn't be here speaking to you guys now if it wasn't for the Black Lives Matters protest, if it wasn't for the murder of George Floyd. The systemic problems would not have come to light to the mass majority. And resistance doesn't always work, but doing nothing doesn't ever work. You know, so people have got to start coming together and making noise. It was the first time I ever protested. But if I have to do it again, I will do it again, because things have got to be changed. We've got to be inconvenient. What I'm asking as well is, not you guys, because you guys seem to be doing a lot, but what I would ask people is to use their platform, use their platforms to start challenging these things that are happening. You know, we've had that Katie Hopkins, that her name popped to my mind, and woman I can't stand, but her name popped to mind because when I thought about these people. She said people like cockroaches. She said that immigrants, people who are fleeing and trying to save their lives and that of their children, you know, she compared the immigrants to cockroaches. And when we're allowing those words and that kind of talk to come across in mass media, that's going to impact the way people think. And, you know, that was allowed. Our governments are allowing that. The media are allowing those talks to come out. It's yeah, I digress, as always. I digress. But yeah, we have to make some changes. Sorry, I'm just going to go to my notes here because I've forgotten what I was going to say. Digressed. Right. So Stacey Abrahams says, when people rise up together, when people fight together, change comes, success comes, and deliverance comes. And what I'm seeing today is a lot more people are coming together. I think that, you know, when we look at the rise of the suffragettes and, you know, they're fighting and they're protesting to be able to work and things like that and have equal rights, you know, I do see a massive change is coming, and I think we're all going to be part of that fight to come, because things will not go back the way they were. Things cannot go back the way they were. We're in a position now where people are like, we are not going to take this anymore. We are going to make changes. We're going to make changes in education, because, you know, our children are failing. I say when our children, I mean like Black Caribbean children are failing in the education system. I know that the media narrative has been that they are doing better than their working class, white, poor male counterparts, but they are still failing. And that is something that we need to change. And so, I want you guys to ask me questions. I don't know what. I could just talk forever. I can talk forever, and I can go off on a tangent. But I think throw me some questions, and I will.
Well, all I'm going to say first of all is thank you for the reference to Stacey Abrams, who I am an enormous fan of.
Oh yeah, I could have quotes all day. I'm just, you know, I just really feel like we have to come together. I feel like a massive change since the start of this pandemic. I think where people are struggling left, right, and centre. I think, you know, when I see, you know, even the statistics for Black and minority ethnic people and the deaths from the pandemic, and we can't say it's because people are more likely to be exposed because they've got the lower paid jobs, more menial jobs. They're out there on the front line. They're fighting this war. It's like a war, isn't it? So they're fighting on the battlefields, and people. I'm quite fortunate, so I can work from home. But everybody else is kind of in their house. They're not fighting on the front line. So of course they're not going to be exposed and therefore being killed by it. It's so when people say, yeah, you can just see the disparities in health and in wealth, and it's really become apparent. But again, what has become apparent is when we're clapping for the NHS and we've got all those NHS posters out there, we're seeing white doctors, white nurses depicted in those pictures. But in reality, when you go to the hospital or you go to the doctors, it tends to be people of different ethnicities who are treating you, because, you know, those doctors are likely, the white doctors and white nurses are likely to be high level, so not doing the frontline work, face-to-face work. They'll be behind the scenes in offices and things like that. That's the reality of how it is. So again, we have to I think we really have to educate people as to the power of the media and how it influences our thinking and our thoughts and our behaviour. Meghan Markle, that, you know, the whole Meghan Markle debacle, you know, it's all, you know, what we see is not always what it is. So yeah, sorry, want to talk, ask me a question.
I was going to say, when you mentioned the media, I personally think, and especially after watching over the last couple of days, we need to take back our media.
Yes.
You know, we need to stop looking at the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and the, you know, Telegraph and whatever. And even with the BBC, I noticed, you know, yesterday Naga Munchetty getting told to apologise for laughing at a joke that Charlie State made.
Yeah.
You know, and Hugh Edwards told to take down his picture of his Welsh flag because he took the mickey out of the UK flag being shown so many times by government ministers. You know, we have to take back our media and let it reflect what we are, not what government would like us to be, I think. It's like,
exactly. It is, yeah. It is. I mean, the whole thing is such a structural and institutional problem, and you can see that. Or people, I say people like us, because, you know, not all types of people will be on a Zoom call about racism on a Saturday afternoon when they could be doing something else. You know, there's certain type of people that take their time out to do this, but for the general public, it's about, we have to change those systems, because it is not such an individual thing, it's a structural and systemic thing. We have to unpick those, we have to unpick it, we have to make those significant changes there for it to filter down. We can't do anything as individuals. We're very limited in what we can achieve. I think even in education, when I think about, you know, my children and their experiences in education, there's some brilliant teachers out there, but unless the head is making those changes, those teachers can't do what they need to do. And if you've got a head who doesn't want to acknowledge that racism has taken place, or acknowledges that racism has taken place, but actually don't really want to deal with that, you know, that has a massive effect on my children. And it has to change. It has to change, because at the same time, you know, if it was the other way around, then my child could be excluded from school, or even like disproportionate rates of death in childbirth. You know, it's like Black women or women of colour are 5 times more likely to die during childbirth than their white counterparts. And that's here in England. This is here in this country. We can't say that's a systemic problem. That's an institutional problem that we need to address. But so far, how it is, it's just accepted, isn't it? It's just accepted that women are going to die.
Well, I will say Sheila Fogarty on LBC has been doing a huge amount of work around that particular subject as it goes.
I like Sheila.
Marion, you wanted to ask something?
To comment, actually, what you were saying, Shelley, about the press, etc. I think they deliberately try and create differences where there shouldn't be any, where I don't think there are any, but they're being created by people. And I think having, the leader of our government, a failed journalist who said some of the most horrendous things. No one's calling the bastard out on them. It really annoys me, I'm afraid.
But this is it.
Some of the things he has said, both in his columns that he's written and in his books, to me are absolutely abhorrent, and he should be jailed under the Race Relations Act for stirring up hatred. And I'm sorry if I'm shouting, because I know I do that sometimes, but some things just really bug me. And trying to create divisions where there weren't any in the past, or there weren't as many. And now I think we're actually being driven towards divisions because it suits their purpose.
Absolutely. And the thing is as well, people keep saying, oh, why do you keep making these links to slavery? And that was 400 years ago and this and that, But actually, it's the media creating this fear of black people, and we're going to kick off everything. We've had 400 years to create problems, right? If we're not going to do it, if we haven't done it yet, we're not going to do it.
Likely to start.
It's madness. But even like the disparity in the media coverage between black women and white women, the way that they covered the Kate Middleton versus Meghan, that was good. Even so, that was a good illustration for people to see, like firsthand. If they wanted to look for it, they could really see how they were identical. They could be identical headlines, but they weren't. But then we have things like, the lady that died this week, and there are so many black women who are being murdered and die or disappear, and they don't get the same press coverage. That guy, I don't even want to say his name, but the guy who went and he murdered 6 people the other day, that was a terrorist attack. Why can't we label it as a terrorist attack? You've got a white pilot who goes and takes down, kills 90 people. It's terrorist-like. And this is what I'm saying, the media and the way they portray things is awful, but people don't look past that. They don't look past that at all. So, so systemic racism is a massive thing. I've just seen some facts here. I just want to go through these facts.
Just before you do, Jackie's had her hand up for a few minutes.
Oh, sorry, Jackie.
Sorry, Jackie.
Jackie, you're on mute.
I just wanted to agree with you when you said about how the limited effects individuals can have and how it's important to come out and protest and to do things collectively. Because when you were talking, I was thinking about in education, it's good what teachers are doing and also some individual heads, but it also depends on what the government are doing in terms of the Department of Education, and then what the government are doing now with the new policing bill, where if you pull down a statue of someone who was a racist, you could get 10 years in prison. Whereas if you attacked a woman, if you raped or killed a woman, actually you'd only get 5 years in prison.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's linking all of those things together, isn't it? Which is what you were saying earlier about what the media is doing, the role of the media, the role of government, and how if you protest against it collectively, then it can be so much more powerful. And how powerful, I remember those protests last year around the murder of George Floyd were, and how you had people coming on demonstrations that had never protested before.
Yeah.
And I think actually on the subject of the protests, some of you may not know that my son is mixed race, and he actually came down to the BLM protests in Verulam Park when we were there. He didn't tell me he was coming down. I didn't even know if he knew they were on, to be honest. But the importance of it to him was he actually didn't realise, he had no idea how much support there was for and how much anti-racism feeling there was in St Albans, and it made a huge difference to him just to know, that actually people did feel that way. I mean, I remember when he was 12, 13, he wouldn't get the bus to school because he would get racist attacks on the bus.
Yeah.
you know, and it was only when I got the bus with him one day and somebody actually attacked me because I had slept with a black man in order to produce this child. Didn't bother correcting them on the issue of adoption or anything like that, but you know, it was like, how dare you? I was like,
was that here in St Albans, Liz?
That was here in St Albans, yeah. Going back about what age is it? About 10 years ago.
Yeah, but the thing, it's insidious. It's so, it's, you know, here in the UK, here in St Albans especially, it is so discreet. And I think someone said microaggressions, you know, they're like lots of silent cuts, lots of little cuts all the time rather than just being in your face. And for somebody like me, I prefer you in your face racist. I prefer the in your face racist because I know where I stand rather than somebody who's just like, yeah, they're the dangerous ones. So yeah, and it hasn't changed here in St Albans. But what I also, you know, the turnout for the protest was brilliant. But what I have noticed is that people have dipped in and they've dipped out again because they have that privilege of being able to show up for support. I've supported, I've given some money, I've done my part, and now I'm going to step out. So I'm going to hear those conversations that are taking place at my dinner table, in my workplace, in my home, wherever, and don't want to say anything. So it's although they kind of feel it, they feel that they are not racist because they're not racist. You know, they're not racist themselves. They feel like it's enough to be not racist. But what I have learned, and I've learned this as well, like over the last year, is it's not enough to be just not racist. We have to be, you have to be anti-racist. And it's about being vocal. You have to challenge it and call it out because, you know, if people are not doing that, then it allows it to continue. And we, as Black people, we need people to be calling it out on our behalf, because if we hadn't have had that support last year, we wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be here being able to make those changes, because it is still this conversation would have still been, oh, that Black person's got a chip on their shoulder, they need to get over it. It's not happening. Like with your son, Liz, you know, people don't see it unless you're in it. People don't see it, and people think, oh, he's just being sensitive. It's not really like that, but it is. It's a real problem. And in the classroom, the children in the classrooms are saying it. They are feeling it in the classrooms. And when my 5-year-old son is feeling it in his classroom, that's disgraceful, you know. And I feel bad because I chose like one of the best schools in St Albans for him to go to, one of the best free schools. I chose a state school, you know, and I moved house for him to get into my children to get into that school, again because I was able to do that. But actually, I prefer him to go to probably a Sync school, which has got a more diverse group of children, so he'd feel more accepted. It's yeah. Anyway, sorry. Carry on. I love to chat.
Garrett, go ahead.
I've been brought up in St Albans. You know, I lived here for the last 52 years, went to all my schooling, brought up here. But I had a pleasure to be a mayoress of St Albans as well. So there was one particular event I went with my husband, who's the mayor of St Albans. And soon as we walked through the door, you could hear a pin drop. You know, this place had literally about 100 people.
Yeah.
But when the door opened to present us as a mayoress and mayor of St Albans, and they saw our faces, honestly, I have never felt it in my whole life that walking through that corridor, I said, why is everybody gone so quiet? And because I wear headscarves, I noticed it straight away that this is what it was. But later on, when he did his speech, and then I had to do a little speech at that event, they realized that I could speak English, I could stand up for myself. And
I'd like anyone to suggest you couldn't, Father.
Yeah, that's how it made me feel, that, you know, I was out, that, you know, you talk about in St Albans that there is a racism, there's so hidden in places.
Oh,
you know.
really? And also,
that sort of stuck with me for a long time. It's been about 3 years since I was the mayor of St Albans, but that I can still feel that, you know, when I'm going through the corridor, that feeling of everybody sort of looking at you, that you come from another planet or something.
Absolutely.
That's how I felt that day.
And a lot of people are feeling that way. That's the thing, you know. A lot of people are feeling that way, and I see the way.
My parents were the second generation, and I was the third. But it's good to hear young people are more vocal and more openly, and they stand up for themselves. And
it's
that was
getting more
really
people.
good thing.
That is my point.
At the Black Lives event, that was really good to see so many. I was there to see so many young people standing up and speaking out, and that's what we need.
Very well.
We do need that, and the problem, my fear
Richard?
is that those children are. My fear is that those young people. Who's singing? What child is here? Hello.
I've just muted Joyce.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, yeah, don't worry, that's my world. But yeah, it's young people. Young people are the ones that are going to make the change, because, you know, we are here, and no disrespect, some of the things I'm asked to speak at, I'm like, I can't change a 45-year-old person's mind. Like, and I don't want to either, because, you know, that is your thought, and, you know, I can influence bits and pieces. But the young people, that's the place that we have got to make the biggest amount of change. And not just with racism, with everything, with the whole way that society is. And I you know, it's going to put a lot of people's backs out. But I'm not talking to black children. I'm talking about all children. All children. That's where my passion is. It's getting young people involved in politics, young people involved in their own education, shaping their areas, getting involved in, you know, really taking, being active participants in their environments. And I think once you get them doing that, they're going to take more care of that. There's going to be less antisocial behaviour. There's going to be more access to education. There's going to be less hate crime. Because when I grew up in St Albans, my best friend was one of my best friends was Pakistani. The other one was Hindu, and the other one was a traveller. And the other one was very low working class, but it was great going around her house because their family was smoked. But we were all like mixed together, and so we were all just all poor basically. But again, that's one of the things is people, you know, I do a lot of advocacy on the behalf of my friends who wear hijabs, because people think it's okay to say certain things to me because I might be black and okay because I was born in St Albans and I'm a little bit, you know, not posh. But they think it's okay to say things about people who wear hijabs. But no, those are my family. Do you know what I mean? I have to stand up and say things about people who are wearing hijabs. That all the misconceptions that people have about these women who can't do this and they can't do that just because they have a head covering on, you know, and that's what I want our white allies to do for us as well. And for somebody like me who might be called too vocal, I'm too, you know, I've got a chip on my shoulder. I'm just I'm speaking out where other people can't, because not everybody has the confidence to do that. And I'm not a natural.
Rashna has her hand up.
Come on, Rashna.
Hi there, hi everybody. Really interesting. I'm really fascinated by all the talks that have been happening here. So if I just introduce myself, I'm the chair of Hertfordshire Asian Women's Association. And also, obviously, we do a lot of work, again, with Farhat and I in our communities. I'm also a housing advisor with a local authority and a transformation life coach. So my experience coming into St Albans, I'm not from St Albans originally. I got married and then moved into St Albans. I'm from Birmingham. It was a bit of a culture shock, I must say. Coming from Birmingham to here, you know, I faced a lot of challenges myself. And I was just thinking, you know, like, surely, you know, it was just such a massive change from being stopped by a police officer, right? Coming from, I used to live in Harpenden at that time. Coming from Harpenden to St Albans, I was, two police officers followed me behind, you know, two cars behind actually. Come to the Harpenden, you know, petrol station. They told me to pull over, and I'm thinking, okay, do they want me to? They don't want. Do they want to go past me? I'm like saying, yeah, go past me. And like, no, pull over. I think, my God, that's the first time I've ever, you know. And I've got my mother-in-law at the back. I'm trying to get to the hospital, to take her to an appointment, and they pulled over.
What car do you drive?
Sorry.
What car do you drive?
It was a Toyota Carina. It wasn't anything, you know.
Oh, okay.
It was a normal car.
You weren't in a Merc or a BMW.
No, unfortunately not at that time, no. And so I pulled over, and a police officer came to my window, opened the window, and first thing he asked me was, "Do you speak English?" Just like that. I looked at him, gave him a dirty look, and I said, "Perfectly well, thank you. How can I help you?" And from that answer, I thought, how dare he? Just because I've got a headscarf, you made that assumption that I'm someone, you know, a lady that can't speak English, you know. And I thought that was so degrading. And I thought, you know what? How dare you speak to me like that? And he said to me, obviously, then he thought, oh well, you know. He asked me, oh, were you thinking of maybe overtaking the car behind you, and in front of you? And I said, no, I do know my highway code. That is a, you know, a solid line there. I wasn't intending to, but that car was driving a bit slow. Okay, I was probably a bit close up. I admit I'm running late for an appointment, but the whole conversation was very negative at that time because the way he spoke to me initially. Do you speak English? I you know, to this day, I remember, and I think, you know what? And then the other thing I had was, again, at work, when I first started, I had a hijab on, yeah? The amount of people that kept away from me just because I had a headscarf on, you know, a few years later down the line, those same people came and spoke to me when they actually got to know me. We had a supervisory development course that I was on 6 weeks. And after that end of that 6 weeks, we had to give each other constructive feedback. One of the feedback I got was like, oh, I actually didn't speak to you first, but after not getting to know you over the 6 weeks, you know, you're such a, you know, lovely person. And I said to the person, you know what, never judge a book by its cover. Just because I have a headscarf on doesn't define me. Look at me as, you know, myself, Rushna. Look at my qualities. Don't look at my headscarf. You know, and it does make a difference. You know, when people look at you and they make those assumptions, you know, you know, for me, I never felt that in Birmingham.
No, well, here, black people are 40 more times likely to be stopped and searched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not that. It's the stereotyping. I've got a second cousin who's mixed heritage, and he works as a car salesman. So he's often having to drive them about. So there he is in a top-end luxury car. And he says he quite worries going out sometimes because the police automatically stop him. How can you afford a car like this?
We've got great British sprinters. She's been racially profiled, stopped by the police. We've got barristers and stuff. We've got so many people in high positions who are being racially profiled and stopped by the police. And you know, it's happening all the time, all the bloody time. It's, you know, and black people are more likely to be to receive fines for COVID lockdown breaches. Well, other people are hosting private parties in restaurants and in their family homes, all that sort of stuff. It's disgusting. But the police are unable to explain the disproportionate use of powers against minorities. What's that about? And so that's kind of the work that I'm going to be doing with Herts Police, and that's one of the things that I'm in the process of working on, with a particular inspector and some other people, is about working on training our local police and changing the way that they engage with people, because a lot of it, I think, is training. They are trained to do a specific job. It's power and control. That's what they're there to do. So it's about changing the way that they think and the way that they engage with people. And we need to get back the local Bobby type thing. And I worked in youth justice for 11 years. So I've done a lot of work in court, advising magistrates and solicitors on sentencing. And I would sit in court and I could see, like literally I could sit on court for the whole day and I would see the disparities in the way that a white child was treated for a crime, exactly the same crime as a black child. And then I also saw the class element of a child whose parent was very wealthy, and they would bypass a criminal conviction altogether because their parents could pay for them to go to therapy or rehab or something else like that. So there's lots and lots of disparities, and these things have got to be dismantled. And yeah, we all have to work together.
I think it goes back to being an ally, I think, actually. It gives you a funny story, actually, about when we were actually in Calais, coming back from Calais. And we'd gone over with about, I think Farrett knows this story. We were coming back from Calais and we had two Muslim ladies in the back of the car and myself and another white lady in the front of the car. And we've got quite used to every time we go to Calais, we get stopped. I'm sure they've got my car number plate on their system to stop every single time. Anyway, the police looked in the windows. This was the British police, looked in the windows of our car and said, "How do you ladies know each other?" And Beverly, who was sitting beside me, said, "Well, we all go to the same mosque." Which obviously the police officer wasn't expecting, but of course there's not an awful lot he could do about it. But
unconscious bias training is needed.
Yes,
it's needed
definitely.
For police, it's needed for schools, it's needed everywhere. It's needed absolutely everywhere. And what I say to people is, you know, if we want change to happen, like I said, you need to be looking in your school playgrounds. Look at your teachers. Look at your so for instance, I'm going to give you an example. one of my friends has got a master's in maths. Okay, she's got a master's in maths, and she's very highly educated, very, very gifted lady. Went for a job as a lunchtime lunchtime advisor, basically a playground assistant at lunchtime, and wanted me to give her a reference. I said no. English is her second language. She's from Bangladesh. She is absolutely phenomenal in everything she does, but because English is her second language and the way that people treat her because she wears a hijab, her confidence is dented, and it's going to be dented if continuously people are looking at you in a certain way, talking to you like you're stupid. You've got a master's in maths. So when I wrote her the reference at school, I said to them, and I did write her a reference, and I said, no, she should not have this job because she should be running this school. She should be a head teacher in the school. Just because her English may not be as fluent as other people's, I cannot give her a reference to say that she should be working as a midday lunchtime assistant in this school when she should be the headmistress. That's what I did. She did get the job. but she shouldn't have been working in that, and like we've been working together, and she's since then left there, and and we talk all the time, but it's about people have this always expecting lower, and this is in the education system as well. People are, oh, your son is so polite. Well, what were you expecting? Some kind of feral, oh, your son's so clever. What are you expecting from my children? That they're not going to be polite, they're not going to be well dressed, they're not going to be well mannered, that they're not going to be educated, they're not going to enjoy reading. Like one throwback child, he obviously likes classical music. I don't know where he got that from, but so I don't know where he got that one from. But again, that was a surprise to me. But it's these things are expected. But yet, despite the fact that my child is getting A stars and likes classical music and all that sort of stuff, I have to say, when you go outside, don't put your hood up. I know you're proud of your school leavers hoodie, and all your friends have got the hood up, but you cannot wear your hood up, because they're going to look at you differently because you are brown. And when your friends are going at the end of term and they are going out to the nunnery and they are playing with their Nerf guns and they're doing their water fights, you can't go. You can't go out there with a Nerf gun, right? You can't do the things that your friends are doing because you are black, and they will look at you differently. And when you were cute, people used to stop you in the street and they used to say how lovely you were and everything else until you turned maybe 10 years old. And then people started looking at you differently. I have that with my children, with my sons. They're my sons, and I have to, and I, oh my gosh, and it is
emotional. I hear you, Shelley.
Helen.
It is emotional. It is very emotional.
Let me go back to my statistics.
Well, hang on, Helen's got her hand up.
I just wanted to say thank you for having being able to share that. That it's just tremendous to be able to hear it, and it's just really embarrassing to think that I live in a society that treats people like that, and I'm probably contributing to it and have done, even though because I'm, a creature of how I've been brought up. And thank you.
But we can all make changes, and the thing is, it's never too late. I mean, I'm not going to fight with anybody, any older person. I say old person because I'm old myself, but any older person to make changes, I will encourage and I will lead you in the right direction. But I'm not going to fight for that because, if people want to make the changes, they will. But it is look in your classrooms and see, how many black children are there, and why are there not black children in that school? Why are people not being made to feel welcome? Why are the TAs, Asian or black and not the teachers? When you're going to your meetings and your conferences, like how many employees are black, how many lower level employees are black, and how many people on the board of directors are black? There's massive disparities, and it's not because people haven't got the education. Oh, there's a woman in Sainsbury's who cleans, and she's got a degree. There's an African woman in Sainsbury's who's cleaning, basically sweeping the floor in there, and she's got a degree, but because she speaks with an African accent, and when people are coming from the Congo and places like that, when people have been displaced and they've managed to get here and they've settled here, and they can't get jobs that are reflective of their levels of qualifications. It's disgusting to change the system.
Can I just say, I was speaking to a friend of mine, talking about she was brought up in St Albans, and she went to a particular school in St Albans, and she's actually working in St Albans as well in a school. And she says the amount of children that don't come out not enjoying their secondary education is she goes, the children don't enjoy it because of they feel they don't fit in. And I said, coming from Birmingham, my best days of my childhood was my school days. Absolutely enjoyed it. We had a very diverse, we had like steel, what are they called, the steel band playing. We had friends and colleagues from all different walks of our life, and we all blended in and we all had a good time. I felt I fitted into that school. You know, I fitted in, my face fitted in. But here I feel even my own children that have gone through school, you know, my son, when we lived in Harpenden and then we moved to St Albans and he went to St Albans school, he went to Beaumont school. He mentioned to me, now he's at uni and he's doing his masters actually. He said to me, Mum, thank God we moved from Harpenden because I hated it there. Because I had no friends I can relate to. I was the only I was worried because he was the only like Asian child there. And I actually spoke to him. I said, are you okay there? You know, like you don't seem happy, but I said, are you okay in school? And he said, yeah. Years down the line, he opened up to me and said, I actually hated Harpenden school because I had no one to relate to. I didn't fit in, Mum. Whereas when he went to school in here, it wasn't as bad, but it's still, you know, it's better than before. But
my
you know, to hear that,
my son is struggling that same way.
Yeah, I mean, to hear someone who's been brought up in St Albans, went through school education, she's in school at the moment and she wants to change this concept that, you know, that you don't enjoy, the kids are not enjoying their school life. My best time of my year is school.
Oh,
you
the
know,
best time. Love school.
Yeah, I love to absolutely love school.
I was born here and I still live here. I'm from Cottermill. You know, my family still live there. I've been here all my life, you know, and I just feel such a, you know, I feel like I don't have a choice really. I feel like I have got to make some changes because these young people are coming to me. You know, I've got black and brown young people and white young children, and they're coming to me. In fact, I'm a security for some of the teenage parties, but they're coming to me and they're telling me the things that they want, and we need to make children feel accepted, included, involved. And when people are talking about kind of gangs and county lines and that kind of stuff, if children are not feeling accepted in school and everywhere else, they're going to find somewhere else that they're accepted. We need to create these spaces for them. We need to create spaces for them. We need to create schools that are actually inclusive. It's all right writing inclusive. The word inclusive doesn't mean shit if it ain't happening. Yeah, we have to be inclusive. My children need to feel. My child doesn't want to go to school because they tell me that they feel like an odd sock. And obviously the child can't explain it because, Mum, you know, you have those trainer socks and you have these socks because it's like being in a pile of white socks. And I'm a black sock, but I'm not, you know, all the black socks are different. You've got a trainer sock, a long sock, or whatever. And that's the only way you could articulate it at the age of 8 years old. You know, it doesn't feel inclusive. So it doesn't matter what you want to write on your mission statement. This is what I need to be speaking to the teachers about as well. And I've got headmistresses who are just constantly denying that there's a problem that's happening in their school when I've got their staff telling me, the parents telling me, you know, and I don't go seeking this information. I think people know that I like to talk, so they come and talk to me and tell me this stuff. And I'm feeding it back to the headmistress and you don't want to listen to me. That is the problem. I'm not calling the individual racist. And if I bring a problem to a head teacher, I'm not calling them racist, but they are perpetuating the cycle of racism if they're not addressing it.
They need to address the issues. I mean, I've had my three, she was 7 at that time, I think. She came up to me one day and said, someone mentioned the word naggy to her and said, these people shouldn't be attending birthday parties. I was gobsmacked. I addressed the issue to her teacher and I said, right, okay, I don't know what conversation was had, but for a young child to be having those thoughts, I think there needs to be some education around in school, and the parents need to be educated as well.
And this is where our white allies can come in and help us, because if we're raising this issue, and this is what I have to say, like I've got a paper trail. I've been raising this issue for the last 5 years at school, so I've actually got paper trails. So now they want to listen because people are supporting me. So that's where our white allies come in. Is, you know, when people are saying, okay, this is an issue, it's not about, well, how is it? Explain, whatever. Just support. You know, just support. Because if we recognise, if we are seeing an issue which might not be as blatantly obvious through the white lens, and that's what we need, you know, that's what we need. I've got a friend, she was born here in St Albans. She's doing some amazing mentoring work with young people in London. She's the approved provider for a certain local authority in London. She's doing amazing stuff. And after Black Lives Matters article, she got into one of the schools around here, which was her senior school that she attended, and she'd done a bit of work there, which is great. Down to Laura Hussey, we love her, Laura. But she's written to the Heart's Ad quite a few times, and her articles have been ignored. So what she said is, like, they've literally just ignored everything she said, and there is an opportunity. We've got black mentors who are approved, who are highly skilled, who can come into school and work with not only the young people but the teachers, because we've got this massive thing in year 5 to 6. You know, Roshna was talking about when the child goes to senior school. There's, you know, we go in, we do PSHE in year 6 and we talk about sex education and everything else. What we don't talk about is when we take a black child or a mixed race child or an Asian child out of that secure bubble of primary school and then drop them into this massive ocean of senior school, which is going to be a lot more racist. You've got teachers there who are entrenched in their thoughts and their views, and they need a support system in there. And there's a couple of organisations that I know of who are really good at doing that stuff, and it's not expensive. We pay for other stuff, you know. We can do that. We could do a lot of stuff with our young people, and it will, you know, all the things that I'm talking about, and I'm talking about, yes, Anti-Racism Day, but all the things linking to inequalities in health and outcomes and everything else. So if we put the services in now with young children, everything else, we do start to combat the obesity and heart disease and drug misuse and mental health issues as well. So, you know, if someone's going through all this as maybe a black child and they come out at 16, 17 with mental health issues as a result of that, well, if you put the services in early, it's going to save a hell of a lot of money later on. And it's not just, and when I talk about black children because we're here today, but I'm not talking about just black children. I'm talking about children all along. You put the services in when they're young, and it will save us money in the future. So it's about the Department of Health coming on board and looking at the bigger picture and working with all the agencies that are around, because there's some amazing stuff going on with individual groups that we can tap into. But we need the support of white allies, so please support.
Right. Do you want to give us your stats now, Shelley, that you've been trying to give us several times?
I don't know if right. So I was just going to say that black boys are more likely to be excluded from school, even when they're engaging in the same disruptive behaviour as their white counterparts. Also, British citizens with foreign sounding names have to send on average 60% more job applications to get a positive response from employers compared to their white counterparts. Young black and ethnic minority children or young people are more likely to be sentenced to custody than their white peers. Black people are 40 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police. And in 2018 to 2019, 76% of hate crimes in England and Wales are racially motivated. I can only assume that has gone up probably 1,000-fold since March last year. And that's what Effie was talking about, since March, since the pandemic, especially when you've got that idiot orange guy who's telling people, you know, about this China pandemic or whatever. Obviously now the racially motivated attacks towards Asian people have increased significantly, as we saw in the deaths that occurred this week, those poor women. But also it's hate crimes, you know, it increased after the 9/11 attacks. Mostly motivated hate crime is massively on the rise, but it's massively underreported because we don't have faith in our systems, our criminal justice systems, to take the matter seriously or to do anything. And actually we're in more fear of the repercussion of us reporting that crime than we are of having the crime taking place. So we need the police to do some more.
Yeah. Can I
Go, Marion.
Yeah, a couple of observations. What you were saying about working with kids, I think employers need to take more responsibility.
Absolutely.
I was an HR manager for years. I've retired now, but there are ways of doing it. So you're saying about having to put in multiple applications for somebody who's got an ethnic type surname, for instance. It's quite simple. You put a reference number on and take the top sheet away, so you don't have the name when you're shortlisting. So you don't have the schools that people went to when you're shortlisting, because they're irrelevant. You're looking at the skills you need.
But that's great. If you could campaign for something like that, that would be so good. You know,
Yeah,
and
that would be fantastic, because you know, job search, even my own children have said the same thing. It's so competitive, and if they see an Asian name or a black name, it can, you know, have an impact. It can.
And sometimes that can be an unconscious bias by the person reading. Or that person's not going to be any good.
It's also conscious bias. I have to tell you something. As a childminder, so I had a surprise baby, so I decided to take a break from my work and jump in puddles and bake some cakes.
Yeah.
So I became a registered childminder. My name is Shelley Hayles. It doesn't sound black sounding. I'm probably the most highly qualified childminder there is in the area, and I am expensive. People come to me, they like what they see on paper, and they come and visit me. As soon as I open the door, and people make excuses.
Yeah.
Now I've started telling people on the phone that I'm black. So then they can make their excuses and not come. So it's not just about unconscious bias, it's blatant bias.
Blatant bias as well.
It's blatant bias, especially here in St Albans. This is the worst place. And I will say, I only take people from recommendation now. I'm oversubscribed, but only for recommendation. I want people to know what I'm about, who I am, and that I'm black, because I don't want to take people wasting my time coming to see me, because they like, especially St Albans, you know, like their Farrow and Ball paint. So they want the most expensive childminder with the best credentials, everything else. But, oh God, not as long as she ain't black. That's all right. You go with the white person who's in special measures, who's going to have your child tied up all day and feed them cheap Iceland food.
Yeah.
We go to Marks and Spencer's.
You know,
I think the other thing as well is once you've got staff, is how you train. And I can remember many years ago now, before I had the kids, and they're nearly 30, my oldest, working in one of the London postgrad teaching hospitals, and I was doing what would nowadays be called diversity training. And it's the use of language. You're saying about the microaggressions, and sometimes it's the daft use. The only one that springs to mind at the moment, a man can be very determined, but a woman is stubborn. And it works with race. And I used to get the people that were coming, and they'd be in all sorts of paramedical professions.
Can I just stop you there? I need to just stop you there. So yeah, but a woman can be, was it?
A woman can be stubborn, where a man is determined.
Right. But a black woman is defiant.
Yes.
I can add another addition to that. So then a white woman is stubborn, but then there's a black woman.
That's probably one that came up when I did the training.
Yeah,
because
that's it. So
you'd start it off with the things that they were comfortable, and then push them all to find out. And we actually got a discussion going in one group I can remember very clearly, and it was mainly with speech therapists. There was a preponderance of them in this group, about 20, was that you don't need to give as much analgesic to Greek people because they don't feel pain like we do. Why they picked on Greek, it must have been the demographic in that part of London, but the Greek community didn't feel pain like we do, so they'll ask for painkillers when they don't really need them.
And that happens with black people all the time as well.
I know, that came out last week, didn't it, in the report about maternity services?
Absolutely.
Women screaming for painkillers during childbirth and being turned down because they're just making fuss.
The amount of people that I've known, and especially, I'm not being funny, it's always like, so you, even when you go to the hernia clinic, so you go to the hernia clinic, and again, there's a disproportionate number of black, and I didn't realise at the time, but when I went to the hernia clinic, all the children in there were either Asian or black. And someone said to me, I think it's the way that, you know, when they cut the cord, she's just tugging it, whatever else. And that's not happening with the white children. All those children in that hernia clinic, and some of those children are really suffering, black and black and Asian. And then the women who are suffering the third degree tears and having to go into surgery, the massive majority of those ladies are Asian, from the Asian background, having horrific childbirths, you know. And I'm not being funny, I can't think of one of my Asian friends who hasn't had a horrific childbirth. And it's just, unless you're around people and having those conversations, you don't know. You think it's just the media making it up. It's just this and that. You know, somebody, I think, rationally just said you're in housing as well. When you look at the housing, you know, with social housing as well, like the conditions some people are just left to live in. Like, you wouldn't put your dog in that, but disproportionately, it's ethnic minority people who are living in that squalid conditions, and that's here in St Albans as well. Mold growing up the walls and things like that. You wouldn't have that.
Yeah. Just had
Go, Farah, quickly, while Shelley's taking a breath. Go.
Good to talk about our experience as a black woman, but it's also be good to talk about what the refugees, settlers who are here in St Albans, what are they going through?
Oh my gosh.
That we have to look at through. And we just had a case, we're not going to mention names, just last week, Rashna and one of our other colleagues dealt with it. A refugee family was put into this appalling condition of house. And we only got to know about it last week, and just this weekend they're doing some work to that house. It was a really, really appalling condition that this house, these refugees family has been put through.
Yeah.
It's not livable.
It's not livable.
You know,
and that's why
been there for 9 months quietly.
Because they were supposed to be grateful for these conditions that they were given. And so when I say like black and the BAME, as they call it, black and minority ethnic people, I'm just lumping everybody together, and refugees would come into that as well, because we know that they are treated just awful, treated terribly. treated absolutely terribly. And so I think Black people and English-speaking Asian people will probably have a better standard level of living right now, because we're able to vocalise and challenge and everything else, because we're maybe second or third generation. But for the refugees, there's loads of stuff that needs to be happening with them, and people are starving. People in here in St Albans are hungry. They're hungry and they're starving. They're having to choose between electric, heating and food, and they're living with mould.
It's meant to be such an affluent area, but to see so many food banks and so many fuel poverty and all this happening, it's quite sad actually, because I think what we need to do in St Albans people, I found, coming from, Birmingham, that they shy away from talking about this kind of issues. They want to brush it all under the carpet. It needs to be addressed, because if we want to make a change, we need to make a change for our future children, our future generations, that it needs to be recognized that there is an issue. And, the more quicker it's addressed amongst, the schools, the parents, everyone else, that, and it's accepted that there is an issue and we can tackle this issue and raise it, raise awareness, we're going to get results. Otherwise, talking about it's not going to happen.
Rashna, I think it's politically, because the schools know which children are coming in and they're hungry. I think, most of the headmistresses, they know which children are struggling, and you've got some really good headmistresses who will use the pupil premium in creative ways and stuff like that so these children are accessing food and stuff, and like with the food banks. But it's, when we've got a council that are rejecting the little £500 grants that people are applying for in the COVID grants, and they're rejecting 96% of those. That's disgusting. It's only £500.
To be fair, Shelley, we've actually had a briefing on that recently. Most of the people who have applied for them have not actually been eligible for them.
Okay, well.
So that is the majority of people who've applied for those £500 grants have not actually been eligible.
But then again, we come down to eligibility, don't we? And like when Russians talk about the food banks, okay, so this is the other thing about food bank. You go to the food bank and you can only go 3 times. Does that mean that I can only be hungry 3 times?
And again, that's not true, because I just referred somebody to one this week for the 4th time, and was greeted by the food bank with, "Thank goodness you've got in touch, because we've been trying to get hold of this lady to help."
So so the food bank, okay, so throwing something else in there, the food bank, do I need to be in receipt of benefits to go to the food bank?
No. All you need is somebody to refer you to the food bank, and that I have just organised this week that any of your local councillors can do that.
When did this change though? Did this change recently?
I don't know when it changed, but
it changed very recently, because before you have to be in. So basically, I know people who are nurses and social workers. That's my background, social work, and last year they were having to use the food bank, and they couldn't, and they were social workers and nurses, and that's what I'm saying. These people are frontline workers, and they weren't on benefits or things like that. People were using the food. That's the only reason I'm bringing that up. I don't know about now, but people are struggling. It's not because they're not working. They are trying their best to work, but they're at the lower levels, and they are accessing the food banks.
Yeah, no, you have to give a reason. So you have to say, if it's debt or, you've lost your job or whatever the actual reason is. There's a litany of reasons. But
there is. I've spoken to Emma Dalton, and Hawa is one of the referrers as well. And there's not a set criteria. If you speak to them and you put in a referral, they will take it each on its merit. So there's not a certain criteria that you have to be on certain benefits. If someone is suffering, they are most likely to help, or if they need help. So I know that, because obviously being a referral agency as well through. So put them through, and they deal with like fuel poverty as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. I just when people telling me things like, "Oh, we don't qualify, we don't," I was like, I always just think about how I would feel, like how desperate I would feel to have to go and ask for food, and if I was turned down for that, how desperate I'd have to feel to put my children on a boat, and I don't know, to go across the sea, and, all those things. I always think about how desperate must these mothers, I say mothers because it's like, who's here today? It's all women, isn't it? But it's
we have had the odd man on here today, and Tom is still here.
Oh, sorry, Tom. You're the minority today, but but just how desperate you must be as a mother, and when I've seen people who are like, don't know, just those. I know it's not just racism, but it's
one thing I wanted to say is, like, when you experience something yourself, then you can only feel what it's like. I've said to someone, if you're not in my shoe, you wouldn't know how it feels like.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is the issue, that a lot of people don't know what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to do some work to raise this awareness, because I feel there's a lot of work that can be done in St Albans to raise that awareness. Black Lives Matters, that protest brought a lot out, you know, a lot of change. It was a very uncomfortable feeling for some.
Yeah.
But I think it was needed. And, you know, how do we work on from there to raise this awareness? Because even till now, sorry to say, but I still feel Birmingham for me is my home.
Denise,
I feel I don't fit in here.
Yeah,
but my kids will never move to Birmingham. When I say to them, let's move to Birmingham, you'll enjoy it. No, this is our home. But then I want to leave them with a home that they can feel that they fit in with.
Yes.
And they feel comfortable. And so it makes me reassured that my children are in the place where they belong.
And yeah, and I have to say, this is one of the things that really gets me in the gut, is the fact that it's only been the last maybe 10, 15 years that I feel as though people are trying to make me feel as I don't belong when I was born here, because you were moving in here with your affluent selves and you were trying to change the demographics and, you know, trying to bougie up the place. I don't know whether it's make it all bougie. It's like, you know, people are like, well, really? Are you from here? Like, actually, yeah. You know, and that's how all those people came to the protests, is because I was like, I'm going to tell your mum. If you don't come to the protest, I'm going to tell your mum, I'm going to tell your dad. And yeah, that's how they came to the protest, because, you know, but it's that feeling of belonging. That I want children to feel like they belong here. You know, they need to. If they were born here, they should feel like they belong, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their skin tone or colour, regardless of their language. You know, it needs to be inclusive, like it was when I was growing up.
Right, ladies, I think that seems like a good place to draw the line, actually, because otherwise we're going to
Can I
still
just
be
ask
sitting
a
here.
question?
One more question then.
One more. What you said just now, Shelley, about it feels different. Can you actually place when you thought things started to go wrong? Because when you were brought up, you said you felt as if you belonged and you didn't face these sort of street racisms that nowadays seems to be becoming more common, even in St Albans.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, there was racism. Don't get me wrong. There was racism, and it was still insidious and underhand and all that kind of stuff. But I think there was more of a mix, because, say, for instance, with the whole catchment area of the schools, we didn't have the affluence that people could move to specific areas to gentrify areas and schools. So, you know, Marlborough School would have a mix of children who are quite affluent and children who are poor. Beaumont School, I went to Sandringham School. I lived in Cottingley. I went to Sandringham School. It was mixed, you know, and you know, all the schools were mixed. Now people are moving, and I see it all the time in my children's schools. People move to get their children in, and they move to another area. They can play the game in that way. So that's what it is. And then also, I think when I was growing up, a lot of people were kind of born here. That's just where you were. Your families are here. You know, it's different generations. And a lot of people now are coming with their money into St Albans. And I just call them the Farrow and Ball set. I'm really sorry if any of you guys are Farrow and Ball set. But I do actually like Farrow and Ball paint. But it's I can't even generalise, because I'm thinking 4x4. Okay, I like a 4x4. Okay, but you know those kind of people. Yeah. And
I drive a 4x4.
I know, I'm thinking the same. I'm thinking 4x4. I'm thinking Farrow and Ball, and I was like, I don't know. I'm talking about myself, but I'm talking about people who are moving in and doing that, not me. But yeah, but I just think that things are changing, and I think that we've lost the sense of community. That's the biggest thing, is we've lost the sense of community, and I think with I've noticed it more when elderly people on my street started dying. It sounds really bad, doesn't it? But like, lots of elderly white people on the street, and because they knew me, they would always come to me, and I'd make them cakes and go around there with the children, all that kind of stuff. And as they started dying, we had people coming in from London, and I say hello, and people look kind of offish, and that sense of community has really been taken away. And you know, you can't, because people are very insular, very selfish. They only care about themselves and where they're going, and I don't like that. And I think, because I've grown up with a sense of community, it's really important for me. And what I've got from the children and young people I'm talking to as well, is they really want that. They are saying to me, they want somewhere that they can meet. They want that sense of community. They want that sense of belonging and identifying with people from their same kind of cultural group. So even if at school they're segregated, then at least after school they can go in a safe space. So rather than being on the street, we need to be able to some place, not youth clubs per se, but spaces where they can go, which are culturally inclusive for them and accessible, which means cheap.
Right, I'm going to suggest that we stop talking now, because otherwise we literally will keep going on this subject for hours. I think it's been a really good day. I think it's been a really good session and good speakers. Unfortunately, the other 3 are gone, but we will send them an email to thank them. But Shelley, thank you so much. I think it's been a very interesting discussion.
Sorry, I digress. In future, you need to give me bullet points, because otherwise I talk all day about everything.
We cannot prescribe to you how you should speak as a black woman. You need to do that yourself.
I can talk for weeks, but just give me a few indicators about what areas you want me to talk about as a black woman.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it.
It's fun. Thank you very much. Take care. Nice meeting you, Rashna, as well.
You too. You too. Thanks, Liz, for organising.
Well, actually, I have to credit where it's due. It was Jackie's idea to do it.
Oh, thank you, Jackie.
I'm just the one with the Zoom subscription. That's all.
Thank you.
No, but it's such an interesting. I'm really glad that you raised this issue, because it's not very often talked about. And sometimes I do feel like the BME community is used as a tick box exercise.
Absolutely.
And I think we are part of this community, and we should be valued. Well, we should be valued. We and have that sense of belonging. And if we all work together, we will get there.
We have to. We have to join together.
Somebody said we didn't do the photo. There is still time. We could do a quick photo.
There's probably not enough of us now, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Next time round.
Next time we'll do it.
Yes.
All right. Well,
Thank
goodbye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Lovely to
Okay,
see you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.